All right, welcome back to another episode of Street Tales. And I have a amazing friend of mine that I am thoroughly impressed with. And I am so honored that he accepted our request to come on the show because he has an amazing story and he's very humble. So he'll never tell you that he has an amazing story. But his name is Tony McFarland. He was a retired Army Sergeant First Class. And I met him because he happens to be one of my dear friends and my neighbors. And I had an opportunity to just kind of get to know him over this. How long have we known each other?
5 years.
5 years. Oh my gosh. So over the 5 years, I've had an opportunity to really get to know him and his family, his wife, his kids. Beautiful, beautiful. And when we started this podcast and we started kind of branching out from just telling law enforcement stories, I thought his story is so great. And so I started kind of working on him and dropping little like, hey, we're doing this podcast. You can always jump in anytime. So I finally talked him into it. And so, Tony, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Excited.
Like I said, Tony has a very compelling story. He has a military career. He was in the military on 9/11 and he has deployments after that. And all of it is just incredibly interesting. So I definitely want us to have an opportunity to jump into all of that. But let's start with, can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and a little bit about what made you Tony?
Yeah. So I grew up in a little town called Warren, Ohio. It's in Northeast Ohio. Single mom. I was actually listening to one of your other podcasts that you had with Vic Martinez, I believe his name was, from New Jersey, I think it was. And he and I had a lot of similarities with how we grew up. Single mom, not the best dads. I guess one of the phrases I would have used when I was a kid is idle hands are the devil's playground. So I wasn't the best kid growing up. It's funny, as I got older, I used to apologize to my mom all the time for being such a terrible kid. And she would just kind of laugh it off. But, now that I have kids and I see how hard it is to be a parent, and I can only imagine what I would have done if my kids did some of the things that I did as a kid. But we were poor. My mom always working, trying to pay the bills. So we were home alone a lot. And when you're home alone a lot and it's just you and your brother that's 10 months older than you, you find stuff to keep yourself busy, and it's not always things that you should be doing. But when you have no supervision or minimal supervision, it's a lot easier to get yourself in trouble. Dad was in the picture, but he wasn't. And I mean that in the sense of he was I would assume still, a terrible human being, abusive, physically, emotionally, mentally. We witnessed him doing things to my mother-in-law, or my stepmom, I'm sorry, when we were little. And I mean like 7 years old. And, you don't really know how to put that into context when you're that young. You don't understand why it's happening. I've seen him get out of a car when I was little and beat somebody with a rubber hose,
Jesus.
and when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, you remember that vivid image, but you don't know why it happened. You don't know, what caused it. Why would somebody get that angry? So a lot of that brought me and my brother very close as kids, to the sense we were close. We would still fight a lot like all siblings do. But it was one of those, he was the only one that was allowed to kick my ass. Nobody else could. So it's just a lot of being from a small little area in Ohio. And it was tough, when you're poor and you're around kids that aren't, you can imagine, you get made fun of a lot. And, you go to school closed, it, not many kids are going to school in. So you get made fun of, you get bullied. And then so my sense of humor is probably stemmed from that. I try to use my sense of humor. A lot of it is to mask. Now that I'm older, and that's what I realized, is a lot of that was just to mask pain as a kid, or to get out of uncomfortable situations, or to deal with things that you just don't want to deal with. So, I use my sense of humor. And I think if people were to describe me after I was gone, I think the one that I think they would use would be funny. At least that's what I hope, because I love making people laugh now. It went from being a tool that I use to manage my feelings to now it's something that I cherish. I love making people laugh. I love seeing people smile. So that's kind of where I came from, hardworking mom, and not such a great dad. So
Yeah. Did your entire childhood was in Ohio, or did you guys move
Yes.
around a lot? Or
No, we lived in, I think, 4 different houses as a kid, but they were all within the 2 towns that we lived in. Grew up in one house that I had a lot of vivid, great memories in. Me and my brother kind of see our childhood a little bit different. I loved our childhood. I didn't mind other than the bullying and stuff, probably because I was a hoodlum though, so it was a little bit different. My brother wasn't like that. So he didn't like being poor. And my mom's not here to defend herself, but she
Yeah.
did things. She would spend money on cigarettes and on lottery tickets. My brother looks at it like that could have been money spent, to do something for us. And I did kind of see it like that as well when we were younger. But now that I look back on it, that was her vice. That was her way of, trying to. I mean, our very first bikes that we ever had were purchased off of her winning Digit Lottery or whatever it was in Ohio.
Right.
So yeah, we kind of have different outlooks on it, and I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything, to be honest with you, because I
Yeah.
think that's what made me who I am today. And I mean all the bad things to go along with the good things that happened. That's what made me who I am and gave me the personality that I have. And I have my downfalls like everybody,
Yeah.
things like that, and things you wish you could change. But at the same time, if you change those things, who would you really be at the end of the
Yeah.
day?
That's a interesting way of looking at it because a lot of times people do look at their lives and go, "Oh, I wished I had." Were you grown up when you grew up? Did you grow up around your extended family, or was it just you, your brother, and your mom? So it was just kind of this trio.
No, we had all of our family. A very close family. Actually, we used to do a family reunion every year. We'd have a golf outing. That was a lot of fun. That's when I fell in love with golf. And a lot of my favorite memories are growing up and being at those family reunions or being around family and visiting my grandmother, my great grandmother. And now that we're here in Florida, we don't, my closest relative is my brother in Alabama. Well, that I speak to. My dad lives in Florida, but I haven't seen him in 20 years. So
Yeah.
I don't really count that. But yeah, so we had all of our family, and that's a lot of what my memories that I cherish were with my family back in Ohio.
Yeah,
So
Tony. So I've always thought about this because I grew up, well, in the poverty section, right? Both of my parents were Marines back in the 80s and 90s, when they made like $14,000 a year. So, yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. And then they split, and we kind of played the bounce around game. But so I moved a lot. Hearing your story, you said you grew up in the same house the entire time in that condition, meaning those same kids knew you. You grew up with the kids that knew where you came from, knew who you were. Whereas I mean, this took years, like elementary school. I would move, and every time I moved, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to try to do something else or whatever, just to try to not get made fun of. Hearing your side, I'm like, maybe I always thought it was, a negative that I moved around so much because I don't really have like a hometown. But listening to the way you're talking about it, I was like, oh, maybe I was, it's one of those blessings in disguise because I had an opportunity to try to like change the outcome or the way people viewed me.
So I will add to that. So my senior year, so I went to 3 different high schools in 4 years. I
Yeah,
went to one school for my freshman year, and then they consolidated the 2 high schools, the rival high schools. And so obviously I had to move to the new high school, which was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And I went there for
yeah.
10th and 11th. And then my senior year, it's a funny story. It's funny, but it's not funny. So we had an actual pimp that lived on our street. So when I say I lived in a pretty bad area, we had a pimp that lived 3 doors down. And for some reason, him and the family across the street, who I always lovingly referred to them as the Kid Rock family, because that's kind of who they look like, no shirts, long hair. And they didn't like the family that lived right next door to me. And it was just a young couple with a kid. I was up in the middle of the night, and I heard a crash outside, and right an asshole gasoline on his front yard, and he had a classic car in his garage, and they busted the garage open, and they tore up his
Jeez.
car and busted windows in his house, and I seen who it was. So the next day when the police showed up, I was outside talking to the police officer that showed up taking his report,
Oh
and the
no.
pimp actually called my brother over. He waved him over, and I see my brother go over and then go back to the house, and apparently he had called my brother over and said, if your brother testifies in court, I'm going to kill him. So he immediately went in and told my mom, of course, because I'm 16 years old. And so my
Yeah.
mom, when I came in the house, my mom had me pack up all my stuff, moved me in with my cousin for 2 weeks. And then we moved out to the country for my senior year. So I did get to reinvent myself. It's funny that you say that.
There you go.
Went from having a mullet and feathered hair to moved out to the country and actually reversed it and shaved my head. Getting ready for the military, you would have thought I would have taken the mullet out there with me, but I didn't. So I shaved my head and I kind of reinvented myself, and I actually was one of the more popular kids. But I went from being in a large school in the city to a
Yeah.
small school where it was seventh grade through 12th grade. and we only had 61 people in our graduating class.
Jeez.
Me being the new kid, everybody knows the new kid when you're in a small town. So,
Yeah.
I use my sense of humor to, to kind of make friends with people, and and it was a great experience, to be honest with you, because I was on a path of probably not being a very good person before that. So
So, Tony, I know you kind of touched on your dad a little bit, and this kind of leads me into the next question of you kind of going through the military because you said you weren't a good person, you weren't making good decisions, et cetera, et cetera. At this point in your life, as a teenager getting ready to decide what to do with the remainder of your life, was it a lot of anger that was manifesting itself from having the relationship that you had with your dad or things that had happened with him? Or was it, I just need to kind of again reinvent myself and get out of that area again?
no, it was my mom being a good parent. So my cousin lived with us, and like I said, me and my brother were only 10 months apart. That's the result of my dad coming home drunk apparently one night after my mom had just had my brother, and he raped her when he was drunk. So that's why
Oh,
they call me my brother Irish twins, because we're so close in age.
Got it.
So anyhow, my cousin lived with us, and my mom gave us the option: you will either get a scholarship to go to college, or you will leave for the military. I'm not going to have you three knuckleheads just running around the city acting a fool.
yeah.
And so my cousin left in 1991 for the Army. My brother followed in 1992, and then I followed in 1993.
Dang.
And all of us were better for it because, especially my brother and I, we needed the discipline. I think for me, more than my brother, obviously. My brother was a good kid. He worked, and when he was a teenager, he was respectful. And I was just, like I said, I was just a hoodlum. And I think I needed the discipline. I needed structure. I needed timeline to keep me focused. So when they left and I got to go to my brother's graduation in 1992, I just remember being at Fort Jackson and thinking to myself, man, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm about to do this in about a year. I don't know if I can do it. To training, it was an eye opener. I was in the infantry, so infantry basic training is a little bit different than the basic training that my brother went to. They had females around him in his basic training when we did. It was just dudes. So,
Yeah.
and back in the '90s, the drill sergeants were a little bit different than they are now. So it was a little stricter, a little tougher. But that's exactly what I needed.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I tell Mo all the time. I tell anybody that asks, the military truly saved my life. A place that could be as dangerous as what the military is when you go on
Hmm.
deployments and such. I truly believe that it saved my life because, like I said, I was not a good kid. And, to this day, I feel bad for my mom having to deal with that. But, I think it turned out pretty okay. So,
You worked out.
Yeah. So Tony, let me ask you this about your basic training, and I'll give you a little background from it. But so my son grew up in small town Maine, and you know, super excited, pumped, and then he goes to basic, and when I could finally talk to him, he's like, "Dad, holy shit! There are some dudes here that have lived like stab wounds, gunshot wounds." Some that again his age, so he's 18,
yeah,
19, whatever, have kids, have baby mama stuff going on.
yeah,
So that's one kind of segment. And then he's like, there's also dudes that came here from like other countries, foreign nationals that are just like trying to get that. And all of a sudden he gets exposed to all of it all at one time. But he goes, again, like most things, going through those hard times, coming out of the other end, succeeding. He made very close friends
yeah.
in that, but what a wide array of backgrounds was that. Again, he's in the Marines, and I know there's always this back and forth between the
All the
different
services. Yeah,
yeah, but he's like, dude, we're all the military, and if
yeah.
shit comes to happen, we all got each other's back. He said something. He goes, we bust each other's balls, but we don't let anybody else bust anybody else's balls.
And
Like, you're
that's
not
just
allowed.
like I was telling you about my brother and I. He's the only one that could kick my ass, and we're the only ones that can really rib each other. But when the push comes to shove, like the first time I had an opportunity to serve with other branches, truly serve with other branches, wasn't actually when
Yeah,
I was at the Pentagon. It was when I was at Central Command, and I worked for Marine colonels, Navy, it was in Air Force O6s, and it was really cool to be in with the other branches of service to kind of get to know what their traditions are like, and just ranks, learn some of their ranks, and how they talk to each other. I
yeah.
mean, the Air Force, I think was the one that that they're basically calling each other by their first names, and
Hey, bud.
hey Jim, how's things going,
How's
and
it
it's a
going?
junior talking to a senior enlisted, and it's like, what the hell just happened here? In basic training, where I lived in Ohio, there wasn't a lot of Hispanic population. So my battle buddy in basic training was a Hispanic kid from California. So that's the first time that I was really immersed around Hispanic folks. And I loved him. He was a genuinely good guy. We took care of one another, because what you do, your battle buddy has to do, and what you fail at, he fails at, type of thing. I was blessed to get a battle buddy that cared about being a soldier and cared about doing things the right way. And when it's time to clean the weapon, you clean the weapon. When it's time to shine your boots, you shine your boots. That's, back in the day when we still shine boots. So, just little things like that. And, it's his work ethic and his demeanor it was business. And and I needed that given my past. I can't have some clown that's going to make me be a clown too. And I go right back to what I was before I came to the military. I need somebody that's going to help keep me in check. And he did that.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to him since we left basic training, but it was nice having someone in basic training that genuinely gave a shit about what we were doing.
So I just want to kind of go back real quick. You decided to go in, I'm assuming because your brother went, you saw his graduation, and your cousin went. But why did they all go Army? And did you choose Army because they all did the same thing? Or what was your reasoning behind that?
So we all did go Army, and I did choose it because that's what they chose.
Okay.
My cousin went to the to the recruiter. They had a thing back then where if you get somebody else to come in, they actually
$100.
give you another rank. So my cousin got to come in as an E2 as opposed to an E1. He got my brother to sign up. And then my brother paid it forward and got me to come in. So he came in as an E2. And then I tried to sucker my best friend and to come in, and he said, yeah, I'm not doing that. I came in as an E1.
No,
I had to start at the bottom and here.
Now you're here.
So I went Army just because they went Army. And, I was so proud of my brother that there's no way I could have backed out of doing it because I didn't want to let him down.
Right.
My brother, like I said, we fought a lot as kids, but what my brother put himself through on account of my dad trying to protect me, I don't know that I can ever repay him for that. And we were just little, and some of the things that he would endure because he would step in when I was having to endure something. I don't know that I'll ever be able to repay him for that. And we had these conversations. As a matter of fact, I called him this morning and I said, is there anything, I'm going on this podcast, is there anything you don't want me to talk about when it comes to our childhood, the dad, 9/11? He said, there's nothing that I'm ashamed of. It's our childhood. It is what it is. And you talk about whatever you want to talk about. So I just want to make sure I had his blessing before I, came on here and said something that might embarrass him or that he felt wasn't appropriate. So, but my brother really is, if I had to leave this earth and say I have one hero, I would say it's him because he's been through a lot in his life on the account. That's just who he is.
That's awesome. So you get into the military or get into the Army, you go through basic training, and you talked a little bit about meeting people that you hadn't been around before. Was there anything in basic training? Was it exactly what you expected? Was it more or less something that you were like, whew, I made it? Or was it like, it was easy, I got it?
So it was an eye opener. I expected it to be hard, but they're yelling at you the second you get there. And then it's like, geez, we didn't even mess up yet. We're getting yelled at. But the funny story is the very first day you get all your gear and they put you on what's called a cattle truck, and you're all on this cattle truck jammed in, standing up. You got your rucksack on the front, duffel bag on the back. Well, we were so close, my cover kept falling off. So I turned it around and I put it on backwards just so it wouldn't fall off.
Oh, shit.
So you know where this is going. So you're so nervous that you're not thinking straight. And then they get all of you off and they're yelling, get off the truck, get off the truck. And I completely forgot my cover was turned around. And we get in, and I remember as I'm running and I turn it around. As soon as we get in formation, one drill sergeant, I don't know who he was. He was in our company, but not my platoon. And he said, who in the fuck got off my truck with their hat turned on backwards? And I'm like, man, oh shit, that was me. And then I'm like, well, I can't lie about it. It's our first day. I don't want to not have integrity on my first day. And I raised my hand. I got smoked on the very first day. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a long 13 weeks for me.
I don't want to do this no more.
Day one, I can get off the truck. Right? So it is what it is. Let's see if we can start over here in about 20 minutes when I'm done getting my ass smoked.
Damn.
After completing basic training, though, most people are like, it was hard, but they were like, I felt a sense of pride. Is that what came with you?
So an extreme sense of pride. Seeing the look on my mom's face and my grandmother's face when they showed up for my graduation was probably one of the highlights of my life. Knowing that I made my mom proud and that I did something that, to be honest, both of us probably didn't think I was going to be able to finish. Just from a mental standpoint, I didn't know that if I could keep my mouth shut. A bunch of dudes yelling at me, and I didn't think I was going to be able to hold it together. Yeah. But I kept telling myself, you need this more than anything. If you go back home, you're going to have to hold your head in shame that you couldn't complete something it's
Yeah.
only as hard as you make it, really. I mean, they're not asking you to build a, Rome in a day. So I just had to figure out, one, how to keep my mouth shut and just put my nose down and just grind every day. Follow the lead of my battle buddy that was doing things the right way. Follow the lead of the other soldiers that were doing things the right way. You're going to have knuckleheads here and there. Just ignore what. But the funny story at the end of basic training, when you get your orders, now I'm definitely afraid of heights, or was.
I am
And
too.
I got my orders, and it said Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and that's where air assault school is, where you jump out of helicopters. And I went to my drill sergeant and I was like, yeah, I'm afraid of heights. We got to figure this out. I can't go here because I'm not going to, obviously not going to jump out of an aircraft. So I'm afraid of heights. And he was like, go get back in formation.
Get out of my face.
So that didn't work out in my favor. I did have to go to 101st, which I'm extremely proud of. And I did go through air assault school. And an even funnier story was the very first jump I had to make out of the aircraft. You do 2 jumps to finish the course, and one is with your gear and one is without your gear. And at the time, I think I weighed as much as a pencil. And when you go to jump up, you have the rotor wash, and it's pushing you down. And the instructor's yelling, "Get out of my aircraft! Get out of my aircraft!" And he starts kicking my feet, and I kept trying to jump, and the rotor wash was pulling me down. So I finally jumped out, or my feet did. The rest of me didn't. So I come and I hit, my chest hits the edge of the aircraft. My chin is inside the aircraft, and my feet came up and hit the bottom of it. And now I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God. I told my drill sergeant I didn't want to do this shit. And here I am.
Yeah, and I'm going to die.
I'm going to die. Yeah, thanks to him. And so, I finally let go, got my hand up underneath, and you're supposed to do 3 bounds all the way down. And I was stopped about that close from the ground. And I was like, that was insane. I'm not doing that again. You got to do it again.
Yeah.
So if you want to graduate, but that's just how my life goes. And shit just never comes easy for me. You persevere and you find out that you could do things that you never thought you could do. And that was something I never thought I would be able to do. So
That's wild.
my son laughs hysterically every time I tell that story because he just imagines me dangling from this aircraft.
I had never heard that one.
That's a good one. Tony, I got 2 stories and a question, but I just wrote 2 quick ones. You talked about being proud. I remember watching my son. Well, actually, I saw my brother, who's 8 years younger than me. He graduated, finished, I don't know what you call it, from basic training. He was also a Marine. Super proud. And then my son, super proud. But I got to say, the one that kind of brought a tear to my eye was like a few months later when he's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm in the military, so now I'm going to pay my own cell phone, and I got my own car, my own insurance." And I was just like, "Oh, son."
My man.
I was like, "I'm so proud of you." I was like,
awesome.
You're my man. And drill instructor, because I didn't want to interrupt you, but when Hillsborough County, I won't name names, but we had heavies, and they were all drill instructors in whatever branch they served in. And the big heavy was a Marine Corps, prior Marine Corps drill instructor. And he was chewing this Navy,
too.
Yes, this former Navy female out about something or other. He goes, "Didn't they teach you how to," oh, that's what it was, marching. "Didn't they teach you how to march in the Navy?" And she just deadpan, "No, sir, we had jobs." I don't think she was just trying to answer his question, but every other DI just, or, whatever you call it. I mean, they're cops, but they all put their hat in their face. They all had to turn around and walk away. That's what I'm saying. The response was like, it wasn't, she wasn't trying to like bust it. That's why he couldn't really get mad.
Yeah.
He still did.
You still got smoked.
Shit. Yeah, he still got smoked, but it was fucking hilarious. I wanted to ask you a question because it is something I have mixed feelings on, but you talked about if you didn't make it. I guess there's a reason, right? I guess it depends on the reason you didn't make it, but the military is not for everybody. Law enforcement's not for everybody. It really isn't. And the basic training is supposed to kind of weed you out. And so this is my struggle. How do you, it's okay if you don't have an answer. What is a better way to handle it instead of sending someone off in shame because they didn't make it, as opposed to saying, "Listen, this just isn't for you. You don't have the demeanor," or whatever the reason might be, as opposed to now you're sending them off and saying, "Yeah, you fucking failed." Again, so I guess it depends on the reason you failed, but.
Right. And they do try to retrain you for your shortcomings. If it's PT related, you can't get extra training for PT failures. If it's weight, they have a weight control program. But at the end of the day, and I hate to say it, there's just people that just can't make it. And it's not that they're trying to send them off in shame, but I don't want that guy next to me if we deploy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You want to know that the person next to you can at least
is able to do it mentally and physically.
Yeah, but my God, to your point, what a state of mind to be in. That, I mean, either this is like, hey, this is my last hope. If I don't make it, then I don't know what I'm going to do. Or everyone in my family has done this, so now I want to.
Right.
And then for whatever reason, you can't make it.
And
It's
that's
devastating.
something that's just something you have to come to terms with on your own. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
I think it just comes down to being honest with yourself and knowing why you didn't make it. Far too many people in today's society, I guess, blame other people for their shortcomings. And as we'll find out today, I was one of those people for a while after my mom passed away. So I guess it just comes down to everybody just looking themselves in the mirror and understanding that you have to be honest with yourself. You can't blame everybody else. If it was in fact somebody else's fault, then they can weed that out and figure that out. But most times our failures are the result of shortcomings, and maybe sometimes it's not even shortcomings. It's just that, like you said, it's just not meant for everybody. Not everybody's meant to run 2 miles in so many minutes, or not everybody's meant to do so many push-ups, or not everybody can take the stress of a deployment or the stress of being yelled at by a drill sergeant, or, just all the things that go along with being a basic trainer, just the military in general. That structure is just not for everyone.
No, for sure. And then, sorry, another question, so were you in the 101st or you just trained? And I just got the hiccups. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I noticed that.
That's why I'm over here like choking myself down, but
get some lemon juice. Yeah. So I did go to Fort Campbell in December of 1993, and I was there until June of 1995. We did it 18 months.
Got it. So did you get over your fear of heights, or you still have it and you just said, fuck it?
So I still have a fear of heights, but it's more so a fear of falling from heights now, if that makes sense to you. So I can be in a high building and look out a window and I'm okay. But if I'm, looking over a guardrail, it's a little bit different because I could fall off of the guardrail.
Yeah,
but I still go on roller coasters. And I used to be deathly afraid of roller coasters because that was one of the things my dad would force us on roller coasters when we were kids. And I don't know if you remember the ride. It's just a big boat that goes back and forth.
Yep.
Now the one they have actually goes all the way upside down, but the one that he had taken us on didn't do that. It just went up and down. Like I told you, I weighed as much as a pencil and I was little. And I remember being on this ride and it went up and it started to come back down. And I came up out of my seat because I was too small to be on the ride. And he had to grab my shirt and pull me back into it. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. This is crazy.
This is dumb.
Well, let me say this. Yeah. Oh, you have claustrophobia too?
If there was one thing I am deathly fearful of, it's I can lay in bed and think of putting myself in a claustrophobic situation and I will literally start to shake. When we were little, my dad, this is one of the asshole moves that he used to do. And he thought it was funny, like a joke. He would put a bean bag over top of us and then lay on it. And one time he was doing it to my brother and I just broke down crying, yelling at him to stop. And that's when I got hit and put into a dark closet and had to stand in there. And now I can't, I was at the dentist not 6 months ago and there was the dentist and the dental hygienist over top of me. And she had just put this mouthpiece in to help hold my mouth open. And I don't know I've been to the dentist 1,000 times since I was a kid. And just something hit me right there with them in my face, this thing in my mouth. And I had a panic attack and I literally had to come up out of the chair. And when I explained to them what happened, because I explained to them, I told them exactly what happened when I was a kid. And they were just looking at me like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But, here I am 50 years old and something that happened to me when I was 6, still affects me to this day. And it's funny how sometimes it manifests itself and sometimes it doesn't. But claustrophobia is 1,000% my biggest fear. I couldn't go on Fear Factor because I know that they would put me in a claustrophobic situation. I'm like, I'm out.
I'm out. Well, let me tap into the roller coaster thing. I haven't been on a roller coaster since my son was 5. And Mo, we were at Busch Gardens, that old rickety wooden one.
Nope.
And he was so excited. He was so happy. And I was like, all right. And I've never had an issue with roller coasters. We go down that dark tunnel and I feel this.
Jesus.
One of those, I'm too tall for the ride. And I felt the beam move my hair. And I was like, oh my God, that could have been
my head.
Devastating. And then my son's looking up at his dad with no head. So I was like, oh, never again. And I haven't been on one since. I was like, fuck that.
Done with that.
Yeah. So that did that for me.
It's crazy. And, I will tell you, like, we haven't gotten into your military career, but I want to say thank you for sharing. A lot of times people carry things like that. You say, here you are 50 years old and experiencing these things, but people do carry these things that happened at childhood or young adulthood or what have into adult life. And then they never talk about it because there's guilt, there's shame, there's all these other emotions that come along with it, or the mere fact that just as a society, we are very comfortable with anger and those kind of emotions, but not with vulnerability and saying, this hurt, I was afraid, those kind of things. And it's not law enforcement related, but this is some of the things that we talk about is that just we have a hard time with saying those words. So thank you for being candid and saying those words about what happened to you in your childhood. And I'm sure as it translates into your later life, as we dive into it, it's just one of those things that we have to start recognizing that we are human and that we have these other emotions that make us feel vulnerable. And it's okay to have places where we can say those things.
I appreciate you. I told you I was nervous before. I've never told anybody some of these stories that I just said on here that all your listeners are going to hear. And I've never told some of my closest friends some of these things, and it's not from embarrassment. It's just,
Oh,
I mean, you probably hear it in my voice at certain times when I'm talking about something. It's just, it's one of those big gulp moments. Like you think back,
Yeah.
today when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to say, my wife will tell you, my hands were shaking
yeah.
because it put me back into the mindset of that
Hmm.
6-year-old little boy that couldn't control the situation.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I'm 50 years old now and I still am affected by that. And they always say, don't let that person, forgive them. Don't let that control you. But I mean,
Yeah.
just look at my hand now. You can see it. Like
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's, it's not that I'm letting that person control me. It's just those emotions are so strong. And
Yeah.
some of the shit that we had to go through as kids, little kids just shouldn't have to go through some of the shit that me and my brother went through.
And
They said you need a license for everything, but you don't need a license to be a parent. And I was always like, that's dumb until I became one. And then you start in it, not necessarily. I mean, listen to me. I'm not sitting here saying advocating that I was the best parent. I fucked up a lot, but you hear the horror stories and you're like, how are they allowed to have fucking kids? So you start to be like, well, maybe they should have a fucking license because I don't
Yeah.
know, or something like Jesus. I don't know how you fix that, but anyway, sorry, that's a bunny trail.
Yeah.
I don't want to get off topic. Sorry, Mom.
no worries.
So Tony, I just wanted to take a minute and talk to you a little bit, but I do appreciate you sharing the stories because I know some of this can be kind of raw, and it's like, especially military guys, law enforcement guys, are like, nobody wants to hear about that stuff. But what I've learned, and you and I have a lot of similarities in our upbringing, is that when you can talk through the good and the bad, and I'll just say this, like, you don't have to have come from poverty or a horrible child situation to be successful or have an interesting story. That's not the point, but there are so many that are going through that and it resonates with them because it's like, okay, they were going through what I'm going through, or maybe even worse, and they came out on the other side and they were able to get control of their life. And you have a wife and you have a family, so the world doesn't look as bleak, right? You have someone that you can, like, okay, somebody understands, or somebody has gone through what I've gone through, or I am currently going through, because that's one of the bigger things, and can come out on the other side in a positive way. It doesn't always have to end in jail or death or something like that, because there's a lot of those moments where you're like, I resonated with that song. I was like, I'm 23, I might not live to see 24. I was like, yeah, that's probably gonna be me, because shit is not going
Yeah.
my way.
Right.
But I just want to give you that space to feel confident and free to share your story, whatever it is.
I appreciate that. I talked to my wife this morning. I talked to my wife, both my kids and my brother this morning to make sure that I had their blessing to talk about, to talk freely. And if there was
Yeah.
anything that they thought was off limits, and I've got certain things with each of them, specifically my son, my brother, and my wife. And when I
Yeah.
asked my wife, given we've been together, this year will be 27 years and we've been through a lot, and it's been a lot of
God
ups
bless you,
and
buddy.
downs, a lot of
Yeah.
downs, to be honest with you, since I was tired. And that's, we'll get into that. And a lot of that is me. So I asked her, is there anything that's off limits? And she said, no. And that surprised me, to be honest with you. I thought she was going to, at least say one or two things. And she said, no, because, and she's a nurse,
Yeah.
for VA. Veterans are her passion.
Yeah.
And her response was, if your story resonates with one veteran, and it helps them seek help, talk to somebody, anything, to see that no matter how hard things get or where you started at doesn't mean that you have to end over here. You can still find a positive place in life. And that was her response is, if you touch one person, then talk about is important. So no, there's nothing off limits. And my brother said the same thing. And my son said, Dad, I'm an open book. And I'll be honest, me coming on this podcast really gave my son and I a very genuine moment this morning. He's 25, he'll be 26 this year. And he's had a lot of struggles in his life. We talked right before the show started. We were talking about our kids,
Yeah.
and um, he's still trying to figure out what he wants to do in life. And that used to bother me, but it doesn't bother me now because he's a good person. Like, he's been through a lot of shit in his young life. And a lot of
Yeah.
that had to do with my military career. It had to do with my temper. It had to do with, took me until just recently, these last couple of years, to figure out that you're a big part of why he is who he is.
Yeah.
And you have to be there when he needs you to be there, because you weren't for so long. And so he and I had a moment this morning when we were talking about this podcast, and we were talking about things that, he said to me after we talked, about 30 minutes after we talked, he comes back out of his ring. He said, "Dad, I just want to tell you that what we talked about this morning really meant a lot to me." He said, "Because you've never asked me how your military career affected me." And
Yes.
said, and I said, "Well, then we need to do that more often." And he said, "It used to be I would be afraid to tell you something because I didn't want to get yelled at." And I said, "It'll never be like that again. Better off than I was 2 years ago." And that's just through the trials and tribulations that Mo is well aware of what's gone on in my life in the last couple of years. And her family has been a huge part of me moving on and getting better in my life, and our family doing better as a unit. So just coming on this podcast actually opened up, communication with my son and I just this morning, and it was awesome.
I want to say I'm glad you said that, because you said that your son is still figuring out, but he's a good person. That resonates with me, because my kids are always, they have this drive and this ambition and this goals. And I said, listen, I would much rather you be a good person than a successful person. Because if you're successful and you suck as a human being, then I failed you. And I truly feel that way. Listen, I want nothing but success for them. So don't misconstrue that. But I want you to be a good person while you do it. All three of us on here know what we're talking about, whereas people reach these, what appear to be lofty heights, goals, whatever, but you're like, that guy's a fucking asshole. And I wouldn't share a sandwich with him, let alone a car, whatever, they're not invited to my house. And so I'm glad you said that. And then number two, and then we'll get back on track a little bit, but you talk about your wife. That is something that is, we all understand our spouses and the support that they have, but they are going through it with you, even though sometimes you feel very alone and isolated, and they're watching you go through it, and it kills them inside. And we're still working on getting some, we might have one on a spouse, because we all understand, and I can speak from a male's perspective, but you always feel alone. It's like, I'm watching you deal with it. I want to help you. And you either shut me down or yell at me, and you won't let me in. And it's just a very common reaction. It's a horrible reaction. I hate that it happens, but I'm glad we're going to be able to hopefully get that locked in. But anyway, back on track. But I appreciate you saying those things just hit me. I was like, fuck yeah.
Sidebar, and I'll go ahead and tease it, because I'm trying to wear her out. I'm trying to get Tony's wife to come on, because she's married to Tony. They have expanded his military career, and she happens to also be a nurse with the VA. And her passion for veterans is just, I would say, unparalleled. Would you agree, Tony?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's what drove her to get a job at the VA. She could see the struggles that I was having at home, and that in itself, my brother. So the opportunity for her to get a job serving veterans, something that's been very dear to her heart for so many years, was a blessing, because she absolutely loves it. And she has gotten to where she's at now in 11 years, which is extremely quick. And it's a direct result of her. She just graduated her master's program, and I couldn't be more amazed and impressed with anybody, the hard work that she's put in to get where she's at. And what I love about it is she's teaching our kids, you're never too old to go back to school. Like I'm in my third college degree. I'm in my last class of my criminal justice degree. And so we're teaching our kids that it's never too late to try to make a difference. It's never too late to make yourself a little bit better than you were yesterday. And my wife is absolutely the reason why I am as successful as I am. And I don't just mean with my career, I just mean as a human being. She's a direct result of, she shows compassion and forgiveness and love. And I don't know anybody else, to be honest with you. And Mo and I have had this discussion quite a few times. I don't know anybody else that would have dealt with my shit as long as she has. And
she loves you, bro.
Behind bars. Yeah, she has to have some kind of love, because it takes a special person to have dealt with some of the things that I've put her through in the last 27 years. But, I told her just this morning, I think it was, that I really am one of the luckiest people in the world to have somebody that really puts up with my shit, because like I said, I don't know who else would have. So,
well, Mo, you brought it up. So let me just say this for spouses, because we are actively looking and trying to talk to anybody, both of you. But I don't have anything to say. I haven't done anything interesting or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you don't. You have perspective. You were there. Their stories are your stories, but from your viewpoint. So you watch.
They're basically single parents in the marriage,
bro.
And that's the hardest. that's the hardest position to be in, is you're a single parent, but you're married and you
Yeah.
just don't have your significant other there other than emotionally. And,
Yeah.
sometimes that's not near enough. Kids run around the
Yes.
house. One of our water pipes burst while I was deployed. And, it's just, I couldn't imagine trying to deal with some of the shit she dealt with while I was gone with two
Yeah.
kids there on top of it. So,
Yeah. And let me
Mary,
just say this.
I
I
know
got
Mary's listening, so
yeah,
you're coming on.
exactly. But I got corrected. In my 20s, I was one of those guys that went around touting behind every great man is a great woman or something like that. And I got fucking checked hard by a mentor of mine. He goes, yeah, that's completely wrong. Beside every great man is a great woman, and vice versa. They're
yeah.
like, they need to be standing right there with you. Otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I mean, listen,
That's
I got
deep.
told that in my 20s, so I'm learning, but I was like, damn, that checked me hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's serious. So tell me, we talked about you getting into the Army. What was your MOS? What were your key assignments? How did your career go through the Army?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
got you to the
So,
Pentagon as an infantry guy, man? I'm very
Yeah.
So
interested about
so
this.
so
Wow.
that's I started off infantry. I was in 11
Yeah.
Hotel, which is a tow gunner, anti-tank. That's because I was an idiot when I took the ASVAB. I got a score just high enough to be a target, and nothing else. Uh, so I did that. Like I said, I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, then went to Camp Casey, Korea for 14 months. Normally it's a 12-month assignment, but because I was getting ready to ETS, and if you have less than 6 months when you're overseas, they make you finish that time out overseas because they're not going to pay to send you back to the States to be there for 2 months. And so
Yeah.
I stayed for 2 more months, and nobody ever talked to me about reenlistment, not once. So I thought, all right, well, I guess my time's up. I'm just going to get out. And to be honest with you, I remember being in formation one morning and I had this staff sergeant walking around and he was maybe 32 years and he just looked like he was 85. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want that to be me when I'm 40 or 50 years old where I can't walk and I can't do this. And,
Yeah.
this is crazy. So I got out and I went back home and I lived with my mom for 13 months. Now, mind you, she was the reason I went in the first time. I
Yeah.
had 8 jobs in 13 months. 8.
Oh,
Damn.
wow.
So this tells you I just couldn't find myself. I just, I was so used to one way of living. And then I
Yeah.
back home and I have all this freedom to do what I want. And, I was a painter. I was a roofer until I stepped on a nail 2 days in and I quit. I was
Jeez.
a garbage man for 1 day. I was so disgusted by that job. I have so much respect for trash collectors now that it is absolutely insane. I try
Yeah.
to take care of our trash collectors come the holidays
right.
because those guys, what they have to put up with is just sheer disgusting.
Disgusting.
So anyhow,
Yeah.
flash forward, all of a sudden my brother shows up one weekend. I had no idea he was coming. He was stationed at the Pentagon. I was home and I was like, the hell are you doing here? And he said, Mom called me and said to take you back to the recruiting station. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, she's tired of your shit. You've had 8 jobs in 13 months. It's time to, not do that anymore.
You're coming
So
back.
so he took me to the recruiting station and they literally gave me, he said, just try the admin side of the house. Try being an admin guy. Like that's what he was. He was an administrative specialist. He's like, you don't have to go into infantry. And so I came in and they said, you have 2 options, Fort Campbell, Kentucky or Korea. And I'm like, I've already been to both of those places. I hate that those are my 2 options. And he said,
Yeah.
take Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I will have you on orders to the Pentagon before you get out of school. Now, school's only about 30 days. And sure enough, 3 days before I got out of school, he had my orders changed to the Pentagon. And he and I got to be stationed together for 3 years or whatever it was, because he had left and gone to Korea and come back.
Yeah.
But we got to be stationed together at the Pentagon. So that ended up being my first assignment back into the military was the Pentagon. And I absolutely loved it there. I did not want to leave. I thought I was going to hop from, office to office there in the Pentagon and just stay there until, or in Crystal City until my career ended
Yeah.
because I loved it there. And then 9/11 hit and that changed everything. So,
So 9/11 happens. You are assigned to the Pentagon that day. Tell me, what does that day look like for you personally first?
well, I think like anybody else starts their story off. When they talk about 9/11, it started out as a normal day, just go to work and doing your thing. And, I used to be a smoker back then. So we'd go down and smoke cigarettes and chitty chat on our breaks. And we'd come back from a smoke break, come upstairs, and the first plane had hit the tower in New York. And we're like, oh shit, that's crazy. So we're actively watching it on a TV, just a couple offices down from my own office. And as we're watching the coverage, the second plane hits, and we're like, okay. And now we're starting to realize, okay, this isn't an accident.
Right.
This is nuts. So we might have watched it for a couple of minutes. We go back into our office, and the craziest thing was we were actively talking about if a plane were to hit the Pentagon, where we thought it would hit.
Right.
Just one of those, if you win the lottery, what would you do?
Right.
Type things. And we were like, if a plane were to hit the Pentagon, where do you think? And one guy said, I think that it would land in the center, courtyard. And I'm like, it's not a lawn dart. How the hell are you going to get it to do that straight? I was like, I think
Yeah.
it would hit the outside corridor for this reason, that reason. And no shit, maybe 3 minutes later, it hits the building.
Oh,
And
shit.
now, mind you, there's construction going on at the Pentagon at the time because they were trying to strengthen the building. It's just rebuild the building, basically. And ironically, the one corridor that the plane hit was the first corridor that they had restructured. So had they not, it might have caused a lot more damage.
Wow.
And sure enough, like I said, so I thought it was a crane that fell. And then immediately the alarms start going off in the building and it smells smoke. You hear people screaming. And then that's when I realized, okay, that wasn't a crane. And then it was just pure chaos, from there for the rest of the day. So I remember AJ was 1 year old and I had a dad ring. That was my first Father's Day present that he had gotten me. I just remember walking and just kissing the ring, just praying, please let me see him one more time. You hear so many stories about people thinking about their kids, and sure enough, in that situation. So my wife and I weren't married at the time. We had been dating. We had our son about 10 months. He was about 10 months old and they moved back to Ohio. So I was living in DC by myself. AJ and my wife were. So I'm just, please let me see him one more time. And my first thought was there was 2 planes that hit in New York. So does that mean there's 2 planes that are going to hit here?
Right.
Yeah. Where's the second
And
one?
so when's it coming?
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're in a haze, to be honest with you, because there's so much going on. And there's all your senses are going off. You're hearing things, you're smelling things, you're seeing things. It's overwhelming, to be honest with you. And so we're trying to make our way out of the building. You're kind of following the crowd. And I remember as they were funneling us to the center courtyard from where I was at. I was only 2 corridors away from where the plane hit, maybe 300 yards, if that, whatever it was. It hit in corridors 3 and 4. I was right at the edge of corridors 5 and 6. And so we're kind of following the crowd into the center courtyard. And just before we got to the stairs to go out into the courtyard, I remember there's a group of about 4 guys carrying a victim that was he was burnt, and you could just hear him screaming. And then that just hit me hard. This elderly lady fell right in front of me, and we picked her up, and I didn't know if she was having a heart attack or we picked her up, tried to shuffle her out. We get into the center courtyard. They're bringing victims outside. We finally get out into the parking lot, and I found my vehicle. I get into my vehicle, and 2 Air Force officers yelled at me to get out of my vehicle. I'm thinking, well, it's already started. So if something was going to happen, it wouldn't happen when I started it. And I think that was their concern, is that cars could be, whatever. So anyways, I get out of my truck and I leave my truck there, and they get us over. And the eeriest part, and I don't remember if they showed this in the coverage, there was a car pulling into the parking lot when this happened, and it had a New York license plate, and the car was abandoned. By the time we all got out there, this car is abandoned in a weird spot. So they had actually taped it off. And I remember walking past the car thinking, that is really, really eerie that it has a New York plate and it's abandoned. So anyhow, I remember getting over to Navy Annexes, I believe is what it was called, across the street. And I just remember sitting there with my hands in my face, just watching the building burn, thinking to myself, that's where my brother's fiance, that's where her office is at. And I don't know if she's at work today or not. I knew my brother was not. I knew my brother was not, because his birthday was September 10th. Or is September 10th. Tomorrow, happy birthday, Chris, I love you. Her birthday would have been September 13th. So my mom came into town to celebrate both of their birthdays from Ohio. She came from Ohio to DC.
Wow.
So that morning, my brother decided to stay home and spend time with my mom. And his fiance asked, do you want me to stay home with you and your mom? And his answer was, no, I want you to save your time, because she was getting ready to get out of the military in February. And when you get out of the military, any leave that you have saved up, you're able to transition out of the military that much sooner. So you're still a soldier, or you're still in the military, but you're not in uniform. You're just waiting for your final ETS date. So he was trying to help her save her days. And then, if you can imagine what that does to him to this day, to know that that simple, act of gesture of kindness, just save your time for you. And I know that's tough it's tough for anybody that would be in that situation. And
So
I tell them all the time. She
she
was
was in her off. Yeah.
she was in her office. General Maud was one general officer that was killed on 9/11, and she was working in his office. She was actually on the phone with her best friend, and her last words were, "Oh my God," she started screaming, and then the phone line went dead.
Damn.
So she seen the plane coming or heard it and then seen
Wow.
it, whichever it was.
Yeah.
So with all the chaos, I couldn't get a hold of my mom or my brother on my cell phone. Just the lines were so busy. Everybody obviously
Yeah.
calling 911. So I couldn't, my mom's however many miles down the road and has no idea if I'm okay or not. And I can't call her to tell her I'm okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, that was the hardest part because I could only imagine what was going through my mom's head at that time.
Of course.
So they finally released us from the parking lot that we were in. I was walking down Columbia Pike and I had taken my top off and it was so hot. And some gentleman picked me up and asked me, was I okay? Did I need a ride? He took me to my house. I got my other vehicle and I had finally got a hold of my mom. And she said, or no, I got a hold of my brother. And he said he was at the Pentagon. He had dropped his fiance's brother off. Well, his fiance's brother had dropped him off at the Pentagon and took his vehicle. And he had told the security that he was a combat lifesaver and they let him.
Your brother was at the Pentagon because he was dropping his fiance's brother off.
His fiance's brother. Yep. They had gone up together. His fiance's brother dropped him off. He told security, the people that were trying to keep people away from the building, I'm a combat lifesaver. And so they let him through. And so when I got there, I told them the same thing and I went and found him and we were just standing there. I remember just standing there with him for hours, just watching the building burn, watching them bring people to my left. I remember them bringing body bags out and my brother had actually made a joke because, the firemen are trying to put the fire out. And he said, he had made a joke. He's like, she's fine. She's just under her desk trying to, get air because they're spraying so much water in there right now. But once, the fire's out, and it's one of those things that you just tell yourself to get through it. And I just remember thinking to myself, I don't know how we're going to get through this. And after a few hours, he told me to go home. He said, just go home and sit with mom. And he came in later that night. Obviously, he had no answers. And then for the next 3 months, he would go to almost daily meetings, updates on the recovery of remains, because what they had done was set up tents in the parking lot of the Pentagon, and they would just take big heaping piles of debris and they would sift through it for, remains. And when they finally had her funeral, they had only identified 85% of her. And I believe the funeral itself was finally held on December 4th. So yeah, it was a tough day. I usually don't go to work on September 11th. I hadn't until this past year. I work at our local grocery store here. It's time to finally get out of the house and, be a part of society on that day and find something to do, take my mind off of it. And, I found that talking about it helps. Sometimes I clam up and, I don't know what to say. I get nervous or I don't know why. It's just, people say, well, that has to be the worst thing that's ever happened to you. It was until 2018 when my mom passed away. That was when my life really turned.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Jesus.
I'm thinking, this is the personal life, but then you're a soldier. And so now you're expected to go to work.
So
what does that look like now?
Yeah.
So we did have to go back to work, back into the Pentagon. They had our offices were actually damaged by water and smoke. So funny story. They weren't letting us back into our offices and they were just going to destroy everything that was in our offices. And I was like, kind of got shit now. I kind of want to keep pictures of my family and, I got some uniforms in there that I probably have cleaned. And
those shits ain't cheap.
So, they ended up replacing things. They had us fill out shit that, I had this left in there and this left in there, whatever. But so a buddy of mine actually snuck back into our office to grab a few things like pictures, and he actually grabbed binders. The average person's going to go in there and get personal shit. He went in and got work shit because he knew how important it was for us to have our stuff and not have to recreate it all.
Yeah.
And that was, all thanks to an MP that wasn't supposed to let us through there. But we explained to him, look, it's 2 offices down. We're just getting binders. You can look at what we bring out. We're not, so.
Yeah, we're not stealing.
Yeah. So we did have to go back to work in the building, and we were in the building for a while, and then we moved over to Crystal City for a while. And that literally reshaped my life and my career. And I say that in the sense of, I was going to get out again. My boss, I told him, I said, I got to regroup, man. This is fucking crazy. Well,
Yeah.
he said, what would it take to keep you in the military? And I said, I told you, at the time, my wife and I weren't married then, and her and my son were in Ohio. And I said, I need to be near family, and kind of regroup. And thinking to myself, there's nothing in Ohio. He's not going to be able to get me there. So I'm good. I'll just be able to get out and,
Yeah.
go back to my regular life. And he comes to me about 2 days later and he's like, hey, I got you a job at the Cleveland Recruiting Battalion. That's about an hour from your family. I said, shit. And it ended up being the best thing that ever happened because he got me that duty assignment. And my wife and I ended up, that was the catalyst that got us back together. And a year later, my daughter was born. So 9/11 was the best thing that's ever happened to me because with
yeah, and I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but recruiting after 9/11 was gangbusters. Like they said, it was the highest growth for military and law enforcement.
Everybody wanted to come serve their country, and that was a beautiful thing to witness and be a part of. I wasn't a recruiter myself; I was on the staff, on the administrative staff. But you get to witness, what the recruiters are out there doing. Great respect for what they do because it is not hard or it is not easy to do what they do. You're basically telling people, "I just need you to sign this blank check." And can't guarantee anything, but good luck to you. And, as technology gets better and better, kids are finding other things to do. Nobody wants to go do that anymore.
It's true. So
That's a fair point.
you go to that's your duty assignment at that point, but then post 9/11, you did deploy.
So I did. So
tell me about that.
So after that assignment in Cleveland, I went to Korea. So, because I have to talk about that leads up to the deployments. So I volunteered to go to Korea a second time because I knew after the 2 assignments that I had, I'd be due to go overseas, and I didn't want my kids to have to go to Germany or somewhere else overseas for 3 years. So I volunteered to go to Korea for a year. And because we were stationed in Ohio, where our family was, they wouldn't have to leave their family. My mom, her parents, everybody was there as a support system. So it was the best time to do something like this. And I'm glad I did that. And I say that because when I was in Korea, I was on orders after Korea to go to Fort Drum, New York, which I did not want to go there. It's too damn cold.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to me, my brother called my branch manager, the person that controls your career and, sends you to your next duty station, puts you on orders, et cetera. If you have an issue, you call your branch manager and then try to help you take care of it. Well, I didn't know that my brother called my branch manager. Called him and they started having a discussion and he tells him his last name. And he said, oh, did you used to work at the Cleveland Recruiting Battalion? And my brother said, no, that was my brother, the person I'm calling on behalf of. This is how small of a world it is. The branch manager at the time was the guy whose job I took at the Cleveland Recruiting Battalion. He had just left. I come in and take his job.
Nice.
And one of the civilians that worked at the Cleveland Recruiting Battalion was good friends with him, and her and I got along great. So she would talk to me about him and still talk to him about me.
Yeah.
So through somebody else, he knew who I was. So when my brother called on my behalf, it was a happy accident.
Yeah.
And the guy said, tell your brother to call me. So, in Korea, obviously it's 13-hour difference, whatever it is, 14-hour difference. So I stay up and I call the guy and we start talking. He says, do you have a security clearance? I said, I do. And he says, well, that opens up a whole new page of options for you. And he said, what do you think about Central Command? No, he said, what do you think about Tampa, Florida? And I'm like, what the hell's in Tampa, Florida? And he said, Central Command. No, I didn't know. So I said, hell yeah, I want to go to Tampa, Florida. And so I come down here and, that's my next duty station. It's amazing. I love it here. I have to flash back to when I was in Cleveland because this is police related. My wife and I were driving home from Cleveland Browns. Yes, we're Browns fans. Preseason football game. I had a couple of beers. We're driving home and I already knew that I was close to the limit, but I was like, I'm fine. Well, we're listening to Larry the Cable Guy and I'm laughing hysterically, not paying attention to the speed, and we get pulled over. Do the breathalyzer 0.084, which is, if I would have burped and farted, I probably would have passed the breathalyzer. So the judge ends up dropping it to reckless operation of a vehicle because he's like, you had good intentions. Obviously you weren't trying to, be shit-faced drunk and drive. And so we had an executive officer that was just an asshole. And he pushed to have a general officer letter of reprimand put into my file for a DUI because that's what the actual BAC stated. And so when that happens, it goes into your file for 5 years and you can appeal it to have it expunged. But if you're not successful, it has backlashes. And what I mean by that, one, it can affect promotion, which it did for me. And the other thing that it can affect is taking special duties by being a drill sergeant or being a recruiter. But the funny thing was, I had an order come up for me to be a drill sergeant. And to do it with that on my record, I had to have an '06 sign off on it. Well, the '06 that I worked for was a Marine colonel by the name of BP McCoy. May not recognize the name, but it was his Marines that pulled down the statue of Saddam Hussein. So he's a pretty badass dude.
Damn right.
And so when I went to him with this, I said, hey, sir, this is what happened. I was very blunt about what happened. And he was very blunt in his response. And he said, no, I'm not going to approve that. He said, you haven't deployed one time for almost 15 years. He said, I have Marines that have deployed 4 and 5 times. I can't sleep at night knowing that I sent you to another duty station where you're not going to deploy. And that was the best decision ever made. At the time, I didn't think so, but it was the best decision ever made on my behalf, because to be honest, I felt like not deploying. I almost felt like I wasn't doing my part. And I know that sounds silly because not everybody's going to deploy, and you don't have to deploy to do your part. I personally, having been at the Pentagon, felt that that would be my closure by deploying, I guess is a weird way to say it. So sure enough, I got the letter expunged. And immediately after that, I came up on the promotion list and was promoted to Sergeant First Class. And they said, well, if we're going to promote you, we're going to send you to a duty station where you're going to deploy. So I was put on orders to Fort Riley, Kansas. And the unit they were sending me to was due to deploy 5 months after I got there. So that then led into my deployments. I was left here in 2009, October 2009. I left my family here because this was our home, basically. I had been coaching for a couple of years, and we had met a lot of families that were very close friends. And I didn't want to take them to Kansas only for me to leave 5 months later and them not to know anybody. So it was back to the whole, when I went to Korea thing, I left them back to stay with family. So I go to Kansas for 5 months. I deploy for 12. I come back for 4 months, wait for them to get out of school, bring them to Kansas, only to be told I'm deploying again in another 8 months. That made it, I was home for a year, but only 8 months of that I got to spend with them before I deployed again. So I had back-to-back deployments, and that's when I went to Afghanistan. And then when I got back from Afghanistan, I was like, my kids didn't ask for this. My family dynamic had changed quite a bit after all that.
Yeah.
And so, it was time to hang up the boots. And
How long were you in the military in totality? I know you said you were in the Army, came out, went back. What was the total time?
Total time was 20 years and 1 day. Exactly. So I gave that extra day just in case I missed a leap year.
1 day.
Yeah,
Bye.
just in case I missed a leap year or some shit. Yeah.
It's funny. I was listening to you when you were saying about how I didn't feel like I had done my part. You're not the first person that we've had on our show to kind of say that. One of our individuals that has been on our show, and he actually wrote a book, Hiding in Plain Sight. Doug White talked about that was one of the things that really impacted his mental health later on in life because of something that occurred in the military where he didn't, his unit deployed, they went without him, and he just beat himself down about not doing his part. I think that is something that is innate in individuals who do this job, who become military, who go to law enforcement. They have such a selfless identity almost that they do sometimes beat themselves up about not doing what they consider their part. So it was very interesting to hear you say like, oh, I hadn't felt like I'd done my part until I deployed. But then on the back end, like you said, there came a point where you said, all right, I think I've done enough now and it's time to hang it up. Super interesting. Tyler?
I was just trying to make the comparison. It's hard to get the military and law enforcement get compared a lot, but when you're listening to you talk, it is not the same. Listening to you bounce around and all the stuff that you're having to deal with, and then what you're talking about deployment, I'm trying to put myself in that mindset, and I'm, like, I don't know, cops, it's not like, oh, he got into a shooting and I want to get to, like, well, at least I was never like that. I
was never like
desire to do that. So it's like, and I'm not saying all deployments are like that. I don't have a good basis for that comparison, but hearing you talk about your family, this is kind of where I wanted to go. It sounded like you were thinking about that and your children, but at the same time, you're still gone. How did you reconcile that when you got out? And maybe I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry, Mo, but this is what's hitting me right now.
No, that's where we were going with it, because there is such an emotional and mental toll that takes place on him and his family.
That time period in itself, I was gone 33 out of 41 months. So if you put that into perspective,
That's
You know, my
crazy.
kids were, my daughter was in elementary school and my son was just one in junior high. So,
Yeah.
33 out of 41 months, that's a long time to miss your
Yeah.
kids growing up. Um, and then, you go back to Korea, I was gone for another year, so that's
Yeah.
almost over 4 years of my kids growing up, I missed. And that had a large impact on who my kids became.
Yeah.
I'll start off with my son, just my son alone, he was my firstborn and he's 3 years older than his sister. And we did everything together. And we got him into sports when he was 6. And that's how I got into coaching. Actually, my wife, we signed him up for football and she said, well, what do you think about coaching? And I was like, no, I've never done that. I don't want to deal with 45 little kids running around. And she's like, well, just sign up to be an assistant coach. I think you'll be great at it. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Sign up as an assistant coach. 3 days later, I get a call. Hey, we don't have enough coaches. So do you want to coach? And I'm like, there's 6. How hard can it be? Right. So I signed up to
Shit.
coach 6-year-old. Yeah. His shit was right. Found out how hard, but how extremely rewarding it is to work with
Yeah.
kids. Like having my son on the team and being able to spend that time with him and watch him grow as not just an athlete, because he was a great athlete, but watching him grow as a person, the way he was with his teammates, the way he was, something didn't go right. I was probably harder on him than he was on himself, which is a great attribute for him to have, but you have
Yeah.
far too many parents that beat their kids up after games. You should have done this and you should have done that. And I was that parent. And I didn't realize that until years later.
Yeah.
My wife will tell you, I was a really good coach. I couldn't find that medium where I could be a good coach, dad.
Ooh, yeah.
But I will say that my son, regardless how hard I was on him, he absolutely loved me being his coach. And that was reflective in when I was in Afghanistan. That was the final straw. So I had coached him in baseball and football here in Florida. And then I coached him in basketball and baseball when we were in Kansas. And then I left to go to Afghanistan. He had 1 season of basketball. He was the point guard and he fell in love with it. Problem was we only had 5 kids on our team. So every game we played, those 5 kids had to play the entire game. And we had a kid that went down that was our point guard. My son took over. So it was 4-on-5 for the rest of the, most of the season. And he fell in love with it. And then the day he was supposed to go to junior high tryouts, he got on a bus and he went home, and I didn't know this. I'm deployed. So I called my wife and I said, hey, how'd it go? How did tryouts go? She said, he didn't do it. He got on the bus and came home. And so yeah, it was Yahoo, whatever the app was that you could look at each other on Yahoo. I don't remember what it was, but anyhow, so I
That's
got
all
him
right.
on
Yeah.
there and I sat him down and I said, how come you didn't go to the tryouts? I said, because you're not here. Sports isn't
Oof.
fun for me anymore. And that
That's
broke
rough.
my heart. And
Yeah.
it broke my heart because I couldn't control it. I didn't get to dictate when I was home and when I wasn't home.
Yeah.
And then when I came home, he had started growing, he used to have short hair like me and he started growing his hair out. He was skateboarding. I could just tell he was different. And so was I, but I didn't see it in myself. I only
Yeah.
seen it in him.
Yeah.
And then, obviously as he got older, he started going through his own trials and tribulations. And he and I had a period of time where he just didn't like me at all. And to be honest, I didn't like myself. I was a terrible human being. That time, the amount of time I spent away from them had a huge impact on my relationship with them, to the point where he's going to be 26 this year and my daughter will be 23, and I'm still rebuilding those relationships with them. But I'm fortunate enough that they want to have that. They want to give me the opportunity because
Yeah.
they do see that I'm trying. For a couple of years, I wasn't trying. I didn't care about anybody but myself. And like I said, once my mom passed away, I just went on a downhill spiral and I didn't want to hear shit anybody had to say. That was the hardest thing that ever happened to me. And I was devastated. And
Yeah.
all the shit that I've been through in my life. And now you take my mom at 62 with cancer. I was done.
Yeah.
I got to a bad enough place where I almost took my own life.
Oh shit.
And the only thing that saved my life is my son was in the bedroom about 30 feet away from me. And had he not been in the house, I probably wouldn't be here today. I guess I say that, and that's hard for me to say on a podcast with a bunch of people listening that I don't know. But I say that because I thought that was the end. My mom's not here anymore. My marriage is struggling. My kids don't like me. And when you don't have the love, what you think is not the love of your family, you do have the love of the
Yeah.
family. It's just right now they don't respect you for acting like an asshole. So I wasn't in a good place. I wasn't thinking clearly, and it It almost ended badly, and I'm glad I could say almost, because
Yeah.
my son being in the other room, I thought I can't have him live with that for the rest of his life, knowing that he heard it and would ultimately have been the one, because my
Yeah.
wife, he got a hold of my wife, and I left the house before she got home, and I stayed at a friend of mine's for a few days, and she finally, I didn't want to listen to anybody. I didn't want to hear what anybody had to say. I didn't care. I mean, I was drinking a lot, because that's how too many veterans deal with whatever it
Yeah.
is you're dealing with in their life. Wish I didn't blame everything around me, but that was just easier.
Yep.
You know, hindsight's 2020, right? So thank God I have people in my life that, like Mo, sitting next to me, some of the struggles I've been through just in the last 5 years, having people that genuinely care about you as a person, and not if you're going to be able to coach their kid or if you're going to be able to do this or that. It's just, I
Yeah.
care where you're going to be tomorrow. I care that you're going to be with your family, that you're going to be with your kids and your wife. And, surrounding yourself with people that genuinely care about you because of who you are and not what you can provide for them is important. And, it's important to talk to people, and knowing I can walk across the street and talk to somebody if I don't feel comfortable to talk to somebody in my home. It's worth its weight in gold.
Tony, I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to just say one thing. Your story is, unfortunately, not to take anything away from it. It's like I've heard it. You know what I mean? Like, you hear that, where kind of like what I was saying, where you feel all alone, but it's really because you've boxed everybody out by whatever methods. You said it was drinking and being an asshole. That's probably 90%. And I count myself in that box as well. And your son, I understand. I don't want to just bang it down, but what are you doing, or what made you decide to choose the path of not going in that direction? Like, what did that look like?
Of not pulling the trigger, you mean?
Well, no, not just that, but like, you recognize there was a problem. What are your
So,
steps to reconcile?
yes,
Because it sounds like you're in a better place with your kids, your wife.
yes.
You're here, thank God. What did that process look like for you?
So that process was a couple of New Year's Eves ago. I was
Mhm.
drinking, and I had said some things out loud that my kids heard. I was mumbling to myself because I was drunk, acting like an idiot. My wife was already in bed, and I had said some things, and my kids overheard it, and they went to my wife, told her what had been said. And
Yeah.
so she immediately took all the weapons we had out of the house, and she brought them over to Mo's house. And that's where they sat for 2 years. And 3 days later, she said, I think you need to leave. I think you need to leave the house. We need some time apart. It's only going to be for a couple of days. And it ended up being in dog years, because it was eight
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
It's absolutely what I needed. It was the kick in the ass that I needed. One, to get, so I hadn't worked, and it's not because I couldn't. I'm retired Army. We don't
Yeah.
need the money financially. And I was like, man, it's kind of nice to be in this situation. But what I didn't realize is, sitting in my house every day for 3 years at that point, I was putting myself on solitary confinement. And I was basically putting my
Mm.
wife into it as well, because she never got a break from me. And that had a huge toll on our relationship, because I'm always there. And when you're acting like a dick, it probably seems like twice the amount of time to everybody around you. My kids didn't want to come out of their bedrooms. My wife didn't want to watch TV with me.
Yeah.
And so when she kicked me out of the house and said, you need to go to your friend's house and stay for a while. And thank God my best friend and his wife took me in, and they rearranged their entire home. They have 4 kids, and they brought me into the house as if I was their family member. And I lived there for 8 months.
Yeah.
And it's what I needed to give them space to kind of process everything that's gone on in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I needed that time alone, even though I was in a house full of 7 people total. I had my own little space out in their little sunroom. But, at night I would just lay there and just think about where my life was headed and what the hell am I doing? You're going to lose everything, because you can't suck up your pride and own up to what you've done, to what you said, to
Mm.
the things that you've done, how you've made everybody around you feel. My
That's a
anger
rough
was the
one, dude.
biggest thing. I was
Yeah.
so mad when my mom's nobody else's fault. It's nobody's fault. Nobody did anything wrong, but
Yeah.
it just crushed me losing my mom.
Yeah.
Because she was my everything, besides my wife, obviously. But my mom was, after everything I went through as a kid, she was everything to me. And she was the reason I went into the military. And she's the reason why I have a successful military career, is because she pushed me there twice.
Yeah.
And then my wife carried that torch after her and I got together. So losing my mom really was tough. And I like I said, I shouldn't use that as an excuse, but it really was hard for me. And I just didn't know how to deal with it. So getting help, finally counseling,
Yeah.
individual and marriage counseling simultaneously. It's huge.
Yeah. So again, Adam Macaluso, he talks about it openly on the show, but combat veteran, also married, beautiful wife Jamie, but they lost their daughter Lucy to cancer a couple years ago, and so he has openly talked about it. And he talks to three. He's got a PTSD therapist that he talks to, a marriage counselor, and then a grieving counselor. And he's like, it's almost like a routine for him. He's like, he honors those times because he's like, he can see where it goes because he's had friends that have gone down a different path, and he doesn't want to be that guy. And again, I'm not saying anything out of turn here, but the fact that thank you for talking about seeking help and seeking therapy, because so many men specifically, I'm a man, Mo, I'll talk about it from men. I'm sure women have the same thing, but there's a stigma. It's a weakness. I don't know. There's the bravado you're supposed to have. I'm a retired veteran. I was I've been deployed. I've been Afghan. They don't want to share that. They don't want to share. They don't want to apologize. They don't want to admit what they've done wrong. And for you to sit there and recognize it and sit in it and to say, I want to be better for my family, that's fucking huge, dude.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that.
The hardest
not
part,
enough men say that shit.
Yeah. And the hardest part is when you're in the marriage counseling and you're looking your wife in the eye and talking about the shitty things you've said and done. I have to be honest with you. That might have been harder than anything else I've done, is just looking at the person who's loved me unconditionally. And I did not treat her that way. And to this day, I'm still trying to make up for lost time. I'm trying to repair the damage that I caused. But I think they all can see that I've done quite a bit. And Mo can even attest to this, that, just the counseling in itself was big. And that was her biggest stipulation. If you're not going to go to counseling, we're done. Because if you're not going to talk to somebody, and her biggest thing wasn't just counseling about us.
Yeah.
She was concerned about all the shit that I talked about my dad. And I've only gave you a snippet. She knows, a majority of it. And she's like, you don't think about those things having an effect on you, but it does. You find yourself in situations, like I said, the whole thing at the dentist, and that stemmed back from when I was 7 years old. And when you don't talk about those things, you can just let them manifest and manifest and manifest. And they come out at the dentist's office because you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a rough thing. So I highly encourage people, and you don't even have to tell people that you're doing it. Nobody has to know you're going to counseling. Get you an online they have it online where you can, like we're doing now, just on camera, talk to them, and you do your hour or whatever, and you hang up. And I had one counselor said to me, something I'll never forget. He said, when you come here, you bring your rucksack and you have all your issues in your rucksack. And when you leave, you leave that rucksack outside my door. You don't take that home. Leave all your shit here with me, and I'll hold on to it until you come back and we can open it back up and bring more shit out. And the more I talked about it and seen it from somebody else's perspective, and I've told Mo this, I'll be honest with you, Mo was one of my biggest cheerleaders. And her and I have had some very lengthy, very emotional conversations during that 8 months that I was gone. I would call her and feeling this, or I'm feeling that, or, she said or did this. And Mo, as you know, is not the, oh, buddy, it's okay. This is what we're going to do. She's like, no, get your head out of your ass. And she said this because you're acting like a dick. But Mo was telling me the things that I needed, not just the things I needed to hear, but she was giving it to me from a perspective of hard love outside my family. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure. Tony, I'm glad I'm not the only one that Mo gives it right back to, because she is same as you. She knows all my shit, and she still talks to me, and we talk every week now. But I still love it because I know Deputy Mo, which badass Mo, and to see her be a wife and a mother. And I'm gonna keep saying it, Mo, bomb ass cook, because you don't ever talk about it. Bomb ass cook. It's just such a different side, but I have to process a lot of what you said because I don't. No. In the best way possible. The best way possible. I would definitely extend the invitation to come back because I would like to dig into it, but I need to process a little bit. That's awesome. Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much.